Hello, welcome in to Fantasy Baseball today on Wednesday, November 12th. I am Frank Stampfl, joined by Chris Towers. Today on the show, we have a first pitch Arizona recap, what we learned at panels, games, in drafts, just talking to people, random conversations. We picked up some fun stuff. Lots of news to discuss since last week as well. There is a lot going on, so we will get into all of that. Chris, we are back, and of course, we go from 80-degree weather to 30-degree weather. How you doing?
Yeah, we got a nice little cold front here in New York City right after we were out in Arizona, where we were like hanging out by the pool and stuff. So, you know, it's an adjustment. I feel a little dried out from Arizona.
Yes.
And then obviously it's cold here, so that makes me feel dry. It's just, I don't know. But okay, can I ask you a question?
Yeah. Let's do it.
Would you say this is a Christmas sweater that I'm wearing?
It feels
It's definitely a wintry. It's got like but like I was at a concert before the show and a woman came up to me and was like, "It's too early for a Christmas sweater." And I was like, "I don't know. It's just a cold weather sweater."
It gives off Christmas vibes. It feels like something you would see in like Home Alone.
Yeah, I wear it around Christmas, but it's cold, you know? I thought it was like there were flurries this morning when I was walking my dog. I thought this was appropriate, but this woman did not agree. She thought I was breaking some sort of protocol by wearing a Christmas sweater in November. So, you know.
You know what?
We got someone in the comments saying it's an ugly sweater, not Christmas. Thanks, I guess. I thought I like it. I don't know.
Let's jump in. First pitch Arizona was awesome. Big thanks to Baseball HQ, Brent Hershey, and Ray Murphy. They put on a fantastic event. Congrats to them. It was their 30th anniversary of FPAS here. If you're watching, you see the hat that I'm wearing. They gave this out to everyone who was there. 30th anniversary. It's always a great weekend. You spend time with the fantasy baseball community, always meeting new people as well. It's just very welcoming. You're chopping it up. If you love fantasy baseball and you've never gone, I just cannot recommend it enough. So
we had a handful of listeners. You don't have to be a person who writes about fantasy baseball or podcasts about it. We had a couple of listeners come up and say hi. That's always extremely cool. It makes me feel very awkward. I don't know about you. Just like, because I'm nobody. Like, who am I? And people think it's cool to meet me. And it's like, guys, it's not cool to meet me at all. I'm nobody. But I love it's great to have support. We recorded the live show that was in your feeds yesterday. That was a ton of fun. Shouts to Scott for answering his phone. I thought there was a 0% chance that when you called Scott at 10 p.m. Without any notice that he would actually answer. So that was delightful that we actually got Scott on the phone.
Yeah, eating his kids' Halloween candy on a Friday night. I absolutely love that. So we did a bunch of other just random activities too, Chris. We hit the batting cage. Sick 73-mile-per-hour exit velocity.
Yeah.
Boy right here.
68 for me. Just, you know what? They were like bouncy balls. So it wasn't a true I feel like you could have gotten that up to like 82 with a real baseball.
Maybe. Speaking of baseballs, we went to the home run derby.
We did not hit them. We did not hit them as hard as Tony Blanco did.
No, he hit one 122.9 miles per hour. We'll talk about that.
Off a child.
Just a little bit. Ooh, yeah, that was it hit right off the kid's kneecap.
He seemed okay, but it caught him on the fly. It was a tough scene.
But one of the cooler parts of this event was two people amongst our group got a ball in the home run derby while, patrolling the outfield, or I guess the behind the outfield, in the stands there.
I believe they called it a berm.
The berm. Mario Cohen, no doubt.
Of course, obviously.
He had to get one. And
there it is.
Had to do it. But also,
you know what you don't have?
This comes with a terrible story.
You don't have the ball that bounced out of your glove so it was incredible. Was it Parks Harbor?
I think it was Ethan Petrie.
Yeah, it was Ethan Petrie, who was like the only one really pulling them down the line. That's where we were. And Frank gets one off the bounce, like hits in front of him. He shoves several children out of the way to get it.
That's not true.
That's not true. And it's like, yeah, good job, Frank. And then the very next ball is hit right to him. And we're like all celebrating. And Frank's like, oh, there's another one. And he tracks it down, gets it right in his glove like Smalls in The Sandlot. And what happened, Frank?
And it just bounced out.
It hit you in the hand?
It hit you right in the palm. I was just
You were injured. You were injured.
Two baseballs back to back came exactly at me. After the entire event, we had no baseballs come right down the left field line. And then boom, 2 in a row. I caught one on the bounce. The one I should catch in the glove smacked me in the palm. I dropped it. No excuse. I was so embarrassed.
You have an excuse.
No.
You had a little hand injury. You had a blister from the batting cages.
These things are not,
and that was why.
Not great. Not great.
It hit you right on the blister.
The last part of the story, which I will tell, which, some people listening, you probably won't appreciate this, but multiple kids asked me for the ball. This is the first ball I've ever caught at a baseball game ever in my life. And it wasn't even a game. It was a home run derby. So I didn't give it to the kids.
I would have let the kids bully me into it.
It is what it is. You know what? I said, if I get another one, I'll give it to you. If I caught that second one, I would have gave him the ball. But
so I will say
the first ball I ever got. Like, come on, I can't give that up.
Yeah. They got a lot more time.
Exactly.
To get balls.
That was also part of my life. Like, dude, you got your whole life ahead of you. You'll get a ball. But yeah, that's how it works.
You are both a stronger and smaller person than me. Because I definitely would have let some child bully me into giving them the ball.
Let's start there with the AFL Home Run Derby. There's not really much to take away from this from a fantasy perspective, but there were 2 Pirates prospects here competing in the finals. One who I think will have much more projection and perhaps value in fantasy for years to come than the other one. And the 2 names here are Esmeralda Valdez and Tony Blanco Jr. They squared off in the finals. Blanco actually wound up winning this thing. He hit one 102.9 miles per hour off the
122.
What did I say?
102.
122.9 miles per hour. But I wanted to use this time to highlight what Valdez has done in the AFL because he has been one of the standout players and is giving himself, I guess, more of a name, more shine, and kind of now putting himself in the top 100 prospect conversation. So in 19 games in the AFL, hitting 368, 8 homers, 27 RBI, 19 walks to 12 strikeouts, and a 1355 OPS. Played 123 games in the minors this year, hit 286, 26 homers, 896 OPS. Played 51 games at AA as well. So he's somebody who could make an impact at some point in 2026. Maybe it's like later on in the season. Maybe it's even early 2027. But Esmeralda Valdez, Chris, has really kind of put his name on the map here in the Arizona Fall League.
Yeah, he struggled when he first got called up to AA. He hit 182 in his first 10 games, but he ended up settling in pretty nicely, hit 260, a 126 WRC plus at AA as a 21-year-old. That's pretty solid. And he didn't really tap into the power at that level, but there is significant power here. Routinely posting exit velocities above 110, 115. We saw a little bit of that power in the home run derby. He got to the finals, lost to his teammate, but 26 homers last season, respectable 25% strikeout rate. There are still some real concerns about the hit tool, but for a Pirates franchise that is pretty desperate for some impact bats, he looks like he might have the potential to be one.
And his teammate, Tony Blanco Jr., wound up winning the Arizona Fall League Home Run Derby here. He's played 13 games in the AFL, hitting 250 with 2 homers, 809 OPS, a 31% strikeout rate. He's very young, only 20 years old, has only played 28 games at A-ball. So this is, I guess, pretty aggressive for him to be in the Arizona Fall League. But even at A-ball, it was a near 34% strikeout rate. Fangraphs has Blanco with 80 grade raw power and a 30 grade potential hit tool. So as impressive as this showing was, he kind of feels like a guy who will shine in the home run derby, but perhaps not much else.
Yeah, if you're a big fan of Yakenzie Noel, Tony Blanc, that's the name, right? The guy on the giant guy on the Guardians.
Kenzie, yes.
Yeah, Franmil Reyes. Like he's like a mountain. Like he's 20 years old. He's 6'7", 243 pounds. He hits the ball a mile. He was the only guy at I can't remember, whatever the park in Mesa is. I can't remember the name of it, but where the home run derby was, where he was the only one who hit the building behind where we were hanging out in left field, which is about, I don't know, must have been at least 400 plus.
They said 430. It felt like 450.
Yeah, it felt like he hit that a long way.
And he did it multiple times.
Yeah, really impressive show from him to win that, but obviously he's much more raw than Esmeralda Valdez. But Valdez is a name to keep an eye on as he matriculates through the upper minors.
Speaking of Pirates prospects, a name that came up a lot this past weekend. He has not been playing in the Arizona Fall League, arguably the top prospect in all of baseball, Konnor Griffin. It felt like whoever I talked to, Chris, and I talked to a few people about this. It was James Anderson, the Welsh, Jonathan Mayo of MLB.com. They all seem pretty split on what to expect from Konnor Griffin for next year, whether it's, he comes to an agreement on an extension and he's up on opening day, which would be very aggressive, mind you. He's only played at AA so far, but he was also a minor league player of the year. Or the Pirates just hold him down until August or September and maintain that prospect eligibility for 2027.
And the thing is, he could come up in April of 2027 and be 20 years old,
which is crazy.
Like that's the thing about, he doesn't turn 20 until the end of April of next year. So if he makes the majors in 2027, he's still well ahead of schedule. But Scott and I talked about this we did like way too early bold predictions back in September, and one of mine was Konnor Griffin is on the Pirates in April. It might have been on opening day, but sometime in April for sure. And my thought process basically, they can't keep screwing around. Like there was a report from Bob Nightingale, I think, the other day saying that the Pirates aren't even going to listen on Paul Skeens, nor should they. It would be ridiculous if the Pirates decided to trade Paul Skeens right now. On the other hand, this is his last minimum salary contract year. He's going to start making real money next year. So as bad as the Pirates are, well, they're not going to be any better with Paul Skeens making $10 million or whatever it's going to be in 2027, unless they find some way to get significant contributions from other players. And one way that the Pirates could prove to their fan base that they actually care about winning games would be to promote Konnor Griffin aggressively. And hopefully that comes with an extension, a long-term deal that, kind of gets him on that Jackson Chourio timeline, but there's no guarantees there, of course.
They are in a tough spot, I think, and partially it's their own doing, because they shouldn't even have to worry about rushing. And I think it would be partially rushing a prospect this young who's this good, because they just refuse to spend or develop other hitters and provide any type of run support for their, really amazing pitching staff that they have there. But they kind of have to balance, like, how aggressive do they want to be with Konnor Griffin versus keeping him down and letting him develop and perhaps, having the likelihood of him turning into a superstar, have a higher chance of happening because he needs more development, right? So they're kind of in this weird spot with Konnor Griffin, and I don't envy them. But, if they do find an extension this offseason, that means that they are pretty likely to have him up on opening day, obviously.
It's worth noting that as a 19-year-old at AA last season, it's only 21 games, so it's a small sample size, but he had a 175 WRC plus at AA.
He got better every level he moved up in the minors.
And in part, that's a 404 BABIP. Well, he had a 392 BABIP at high A, and he was better at AA. So I think this kid is, I think he's the best prospect in baseball. And I think we see him in the first half of this year. I hope it's, obviously I hope he goes out in spring training and forces their hand, right? I don't want it to be a situation where it's handed to him, because I do think young players need to experience some friction on their way to the majors, and you shouldn't necessarily have anything handed to you when you haven't proven it in his case, but I hope he forces them to make a very tough decision in March of 2026. And I have a lot of confidence. And just to give some sense of what he did last season, again, 19 years old, made it to AA across 3 levels of the minors, 333, 21 homers, which 21 homers as a 19-year-old, that's really impressive. 65 steals. This is a potential fantasy superstar. So I'm very excited about Konnor Griffin and his proximity. Whether it's first half of 2026, I think we'll get a better sense of that in March. But if you're looking for the guy who could shoot up draft boards and become a source of great controversy within the fantasy baseball community, if that happens, Konnor Griffin's your guy.
Yeah. The biggest name out in the AFL right now is Tigers prospect Kevin McGonigal. We spoke about him on the live podcast we did out in Arizona. Again, that's in your feed. But we saw him hit an RBI triple, and then also he smacked a 2-run home run. And that one sounded really good off the bat. Unfortunately, we didn't get the exit velocity for that in that game. The early ADP for McGonigal is 276.2. He hasn't played above AA, but it seems like there's more of a real chance that he is actually up on opening day for the Tigers. I think their offseason might kind of determine whether that happens too, because they've been linked to Alex Bregman. They tried for him last offseason. They have been linked to Bo Bichette. So if they sign one of those guys, maybe it gives them an excuse to kind of keep McGonigal down for a little bit longer. But if he tears it up in spring training, perhaps he is just up on opening day for next season. While we're talking about prospects, drop a comment here on YouTube or let us know in the live chat which prospect do you think will debut first in 2026. And after you do that, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for a bunch of off-season fantasy baseball content. Let's take a break. We'll get to a bunch of news right after this.
Only CBS Sports can bring you big time during the heart of Saturday afternoons. It's big time.
It's big time. It's big time. It's big time.
On CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
Welcome back in Fantasy Baseball today. Lots of news to go over since I think the last time we spoke about news, it was last Tuesday night. So there has a lot that has happened since then. Emmanuel Clase and Luis Ortiz were indicted on multiple federal charges related to bets on pitches thrown in MLB games. Both pitchers were paid to intentionally throw balls as bettors could wager on a single pitch being a ball or a strike. Then we learned afterwards, just recently, in the last couple of days, that prominent U.S. sportsbooks are now establishing a nationwide $200 betting limit on baseball wagers centered on individual pitches and prohibiting those bets from being used in parlays. So I guess that's the aftermath, the fallout here from a betting perspective, if you care about that side of things. But Chris, I haven't seen anything kind of cemented or solidified here regarding these two, but my guess is they will not be pitching at least next season and perhaps not ever again.
Yeah, never again.
Yeah.
This is it's the cardinal sin of professional baseball, and it has been for about 106 years, if I'm remembering the timeline correctly. 1919, I think, is the Black Sox scandal. This is a hard red line for professional sports and especially Major League Baseball. And I don't know. It's hard to understand how players get into situations like this, and it's hard to wrap your head around. It's really frustrating to see an incredible player like Emmanuel Clase throw his career away over what on the surface appears to be a pretty trivial amount of money, though I would guess further investigation would reveal that there was a lot more than just a few $1,000s at stake that's been reported. It's a real bummer. It's an existential problem for professional sports that, I know there's a lot of monitoring of this stuff, and, hopefully we start to see these situations go away as players realize what the risks are. But obviously we've seen situations in basketball We've seen a couple of players in the NFL be suspended for gambling, and now it's hitting Major League Baseball. In a more high-profile way, there was a utility player last year whose name I'm blanking on, who was suspended for life. It's really bad, and you just hope it's not any more widespread than what's been reported so far, but you kind of fear that it will be.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you bring into question the integrity of the game in any sport, it's, why are we watching? Why are we devoting so much of our life and our attention and playing fantasy and betting on these games, whatever you're doing, right? It's just,
and look, you can say it's only one pitch, but it's not. Every pitch impacts every other pitch, that's just the way it works. So yeah, it's a real bummer. And I hope there's not more coming.
Yeah. With Class A gone, Cade Smith looks like he is here to stay. Early NFBC ADP is 63.6. He is the fourth reliever being drafted right now. Last year, 2.93 ERA, a 1 whip on the nose, 12.7 K per 9, 16 saves. Obviously, the Guardians have had a pretty long history of just awesome closers, and it kind of feels like Cade Smith is stepping into that now as well.
I think he's just about as good as any reliever in baseball. I believe he has the lowest FIP in baseball over the past 2 seasons, and I actually don't think it's particularly close. Cade Smith is a really, really good pitcher. We saw it last year. There were some bumps in the road around the midseason point, but once he locked in, he was really as good as anyone. He has. That's wild. Over the course of the last 2 seasons, Cade Smith has a 167 FIP. That is the best in baseball. Second best is Mason Miller at 220. So more than a half run better. And if you're more of an ERA kind of person, well, only 10 pitchers have a better ERA over the past 2 seasons, minimum 100 innings, than Cade Smith's 242 mark. He is, I think, every bit as good as Emmanuel Clase. Obviously a very different type of pitcher, much more of a strikeout pitcher, which means he's probably a little better for fantasy than Emmanuel Clase if he can continue to be this dominant. So, should be one of the first few pitchers at the relief pitcher position off the board, which is good because it's not a great position right now.
No, there's a lot in flux right now, including the Rays, who declined Pete Fairbanks' $11 million club option, making him a free agent. And my guess, the Rays have done this before. It feels like a bullpen by committee, at least for now, unless somebody emerges. There's Griffin Jacks, who they traded for at the deadline last year from the Twins. He is an extremely talented reliever in his own right. Edwin Uceta, who finished the season really strong in the second half, a 1.78 ERA, 12.7 K per 9. I was talking to a few people this weekend, and they think there's a chance the Rays could try to transition Griffin Jacks back into being a starter. So if they did that, there's one less name in the mix. But the way things are kind of set up right now, Chris, I would lean Griffin Jacks and kind of Uceta maybe splitting saves there.
Yeah, there's been a little bit of speculation about Griffin Jacks, as you mentioned, moving to the rotation. There was a little bit last offseason as well. He's got a really robust pitch mix for a reliever. I think it's like 4 pitches that he throws at least 10% of the time, which you don't see a lot from relievers. So the Rays may opt to do that. If not, I think he'll absolutely be in that conversation. And Uceta, great in the second half. And more what we expected, because remember, this time last year, I think the default assumption for fantasy players was Pete Fairbanks isn't going to keep that job. It's Edwin Uceta's job. He was so dominant, and then that didn't happen, and Uceta really struggled in the first half. But I still think Uceta can be a closer caliber reliever.
The Dodgers picked up Max Muncy's $10 million club option. He finished with 19 home runs and 846 OPS in 100 games. We know the story. He started wearing glasses April 30th. From that point forward, he was much better, hit all 19 of his homers with a 969 OPS. but he does come with significant injury risk, has played just 53% of his games over the past 2 years. Again, that's Max Muncy with the Dodgers. The Rays picked up Brandon Lau's $11.5 million option. He hit .256 with 31 homers, 83 RBI in 134 games. That was his most games played since 2021. So like Muncy, we have a pretty extensive injury history here for Lau. Just the second time he's exceeded 110 games in his career. The Padres exercised Ramon Laureano's $6.5 million option, and he performed really well overall. .281 batting average, 24 homers, 7 steals in 132 games. I know he was really good in the second half of 2024 with the Atlanta Braves as well, but Scott recently pointed this out. Laureano in 26 games in Petco Park last year, which will be his home park in 2026, hit .218 with 1 homer and a .576 OPS. So it's a really small sample size. I don't want to put too much on it, but he has not performed well there.
Yeah, it's obviously one of the tougher parks in baseball for hitters. It's especially tough for, we remember Juan Soto's time there. Really tough for hitters who have more all fields power than real pull power. Laureano did pull 22% of his batted balls in the air last season, so I don't know how much of a concern that should be for him, but it's something to keep in mind as we move forward. However, I would be surprised. I haven't seen Laureano's price, but let's just see. Yeah, 248.7. One thing I've noticed, we're only 30 drafts in, but there are a handful of players that like I expected to be out on at price. Ramon Laureano is one. Matthew Boyd was another one where I was just like, I don't really buy what they did last season, or I don't buy it entirely. And then I look at the price and it's like, oh, it doesn't matter. Ramon Laureano's a 12th round pick in a 16th round pick in a 12-team format. And Matthew Boyd's 233.4. I was writing about Matthew Boyd today. I was like, I'm not in on Matthew Boyd. He's going to be a bust. And then it turns out, I guess this is just what happens in 2025. You can't really convince the fantasy baseball crowd of anything anymore. Everyone's too sharp. So those guys seem like decent values, actually.
Yeah, I noticed that while doing a draft this past weekend. That's right. I'm drafting here in November. Perhaps we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But yeah,
Frank wrote something today.
Yeah, how about that? I wasn't feeling great yesterday. 4 days of being out in the sun and having a couple
brewskis.
And and then flying back, I was so beat up yesterday. I said, "Look, guys, we can't podcast today. I'll just I'll write a story about this draft that I did," and so I did. So check it out on the website.
I love that's your response. Yeah. I'm not feeling great. I'm tired. I'm beat up. Let me write.
It's easier than podcasting.
I guess, yeah. I don't agree with that personally, but to each their own.
Well, Chris, if you want, you can make the rundown next week for the podcast.
I don't want to do that. No,
that's a lot harder.
That sounds like a lot of writing.
Yeah, exactly. The GM meetings are going on this week. We're getting some updates here. D-backs GM Mike Hazen said that trading Ketel Marte is unlikely to happen this offseason. Braves president Alex Anthopoulos said that Spencer Schwellenbach is now pain-free following his fractured right elbow. In 17 starts, he had a 3.09 ERA, .97 whip. Just under a strikeout per inning. His velocity was up 1 mile per hour on the fastball. Early ADP, 81.4 as the SP19. Does that sound appropriate for Spencer Schwellenbach?
This is a guy I really don't have a good sense of what to do with. I ranked him 12th, which is probably too aggressive. And I'll probably be moving that down.
That sounds like you would like him at SP19.
But when I actually sit down and think about it, that I don't feel great about that. Part of it is just this is not a guy who has any real track record outside of 2024 of being able to throw a lot of innings as an effective starting pitcher. He threw 165, I think, in 2024 across the majors and minors, and he's a converted shortstop. He doesn't have a lot of innings on his arm. So, it's kind of it doesn't mean he can't do it type of thing. But then He comes back out in 2025. He was very good. There's a lot to like about him. Even if he's not necessarily an elite strikeout pitcher, I think he could be. He's throwing harder last year, and it felt like his arm just couldn't handle it. And so I think I do have to move him down just because it's not so much a question of talent as it is, can he hold up? And that's a real question here.
Tommy Edman will undergo right ankle surgery next week. The Dodgers expect Edman to be ready around the start of spring training. That's a situation to monitor there. And President David Stern said prospect Carson Benj will enter spring training with a chance to make the opening day roster. He's turning 23 in January. He was a first-round pick in 2024. This past season hit 281, 15 homers, 22 steals, 857 OPS. He did get up to 24 games at AAA. He struggled mightily there, but the exit velocities that we have at AAA, it's like 92 miles per hour on average. So he's got a little pop. He's got some speed. Really, really interesting prospect here, Carson Bench.
Yeah, good approach at the plate. Even at AAA where he struggled, it was mostly batting average. He had a 188 BABIP, but only an 18% strikeout rate. Like you said, he hit the ball hard. He can make stuff happen on the bases. So I think, there were some prospect people I follow who thought Carson Bench should have just been the Mets center fielder down the stretch, despite his struggles at AAA. So would not be surprised at all if they gave him that opportunity. And this is a team that does need a real legit center fielder. So I think he's going to have a chance to play and could be. I want to say Scott has comped him to Brandon Nimmo, actually. And I want to say I've seen that comp elsewhere as well. So
I feel like he has more speed than Nimmo.
Maybe. He stole 22 bases last year, but maybe there's more underlying foot speed. But Nimmo's been a decent base stealer the past couple of years. He's tapped into a little more power. But I think the takeaway is Benj is probably not a superstar, but could be a very solid all-around player.
13 players received the qualifying offer, including Kyle Tucker, Kyle Schwarber, Bo Bichette, Framber Valdez, Dylan Cease, Edwin Diaz, Ranger Suarez, Zach Gallen, Shota Imanaga, Michael King, Trent Grisham, Gleyber Torres, and Brandon Woodruff. So that is a 1-year, $22 million offer. They have until November 18th to decide on that. And the only ones I thought maybe could accept this were Grisham, Imanaga, Gleyber Torres. We did get a report earlier on Tuesday night. John Heyman wrote that Imanaga and Grisham are expected to decline the qualifying offer, so making both of those guys free agents to go anywhere they go, anywhere they want. So
I wouldn't be totally shocked if Gallen and Woodruff took the qualifying offer as kind of an effectively a pillow contract to try to build their value up for 2027, although there is the concern about a looming lockout in 2027 and what that will mean for team budgets and free agency. So, there also might be the other way where players are willing to take a little less money overall in the long term to lock in a guarantee. So I don't know. I'm very interested to see what happens with Gallen, Imanaga, Woodruff, and Michael King, especially in free agency, because we've got the one season with Michael King. I was writing about him as well. We've seen one time where he's been able to stay healthy as a starting pitcher, and he was amazing. And then he fell apart almost immediately, and he's 31. So Michael King is a fascinating player in a lot of ways for 2027.
We do have
2026.
Yeah, don't jump ahead too far, Chris. Come on. We have awards that were handed out. Rookie of the Year, Nick Kurtz, unanimous winner in the American League. Drake Baldwin, a close finish over Cade Horton in the NL. And then Manager of the Year, we got Pat Murphy in the NL and Steven Vogt in the AL. Both winners go back-to-back. How about that? Pretty interesting stuff there. Blue Jays GM Ross Atkins said the Blue Jays are not committed to using Jeff Hoffman as their primary closer in 2026. Of course, gave up a game-tying home run in Game 7 of the World Series. Atkins mentioned Jimmy Garcia and Louis Varland as potential options for saves and did not rule out signing somebody this offseason. So if you're doing early drafts, just be careful with Jeff Hoffman. We don't We just don't know if he's going to definitely be the closer for next season. Roman Anthony will have a normal offseason after dealing with a left oblique strain in September. The early ADP, it's pretty high on Roman Anthony, 52.9 as the 12th outfielder off the board, going right between Wyatt Langford and Brent Rooker. Marcelo Meyer, who underwent wrist surgery in August, should be fully recovered well ahead of spring training. Kyle Hendricks and David Fletcher are retiring from baseball. And it sounds like as of now, we have at least 3 Japanese players who are confirmed to be posted this offseason. 25-year-old slugger Munetaka Murakami, 29-year-old corner infielder Kazuma Okamoto, and 27-year-old starting pitcher Tatsuya Imai. And just wanted to mention with Imai, we were talking to or heard this somewhere, Eno Saris from The Athletic said that if Imai comes over, signs with an MLB team, that he would be a top 30 starting pitcher for him in fantasy, which I thought was pretty interesting, right? Like Eno Saris, one of the smartest dudes out there, I really like this Tatsuya Imai pitcher.
Yeah, and this is based on, the pitch shape and stuff characteristics that Imai showed over in Japan. But, I mean, it's worth noting, he had a 1.92 ERA last season, throwing 163 innings. Now, as we say with all players in Japan right now, the ERA is not quite as impressive as it seems at first glance. He was only 6th in the Pacific League in ERA. That's still pretty good, but it's worth keeping in mind. A 1.92 ERA over there is not the same thing as a 1.92 ERA here, because the league as a whole had an ERA of 3.04.
That's pretty good.
That's still very good, but Japan is in the midst of a crazy dead ball era, but 9.8 K per 9, 2.5 walks per 9. Control's been an issue throughout his career, but it's something that's gotten better every season for Imai. He throws in the mid to high 90s, seems to have good secondaries, so that's a guy I'm very interested in diving a little deeper on, 27 years old. Murakami, I'm surprised at how aggressive the contract projections have been for him, given some real question marks about the hit tool and his ability to catch up to velocity as well. I think the stat is he hit under 100 against pitches over 100 miles an hour in 2020, over 93 miles per hour in 2023. You see a lot less velocity in Japan, and I think he only played like 55 games or 69 games last season. Was a bounce-back season. He has the record for a Japanese-born player for single-season home runs in Japan. I believe that was a Sadahara O record that he broke. Big power. I think a best-case scenario could be like a Pete Alonso type for Murakami, but that's a little bit of a stretch right now. So this is one I'm going to kind of let the major league teams tell me how they feel about Munetaka Murakami.
Yeah, I've been starting to dig into some of these Japanese players coming over this offseason, and there are real questions with the zone contact for Munetaka Murakami. I think he's running like 74% zone contact rates in Japan. And again, he's going to
Rafael Devers is one of the only players you see in that range. And obviously Rafael Devers is a pretty big outlier.
I think the video I was watching did show that Ohtani had similar zone contacts. He was in Japan. He was also a little bit younger. And obviously he just improved over the years. So it's an interesting situation. I think the way you put it is good. Is, let's see what kind of contract he gets and how much money he's given this offseason.
One thing I want to say before we move on that topic, though, is players tend to do better the more they see velocity. And so seeing less velocity in Japan, you're not going to train for it as much. I would not expect that to be as big of a concern when he gets to the majors, because he'll naturally see more 95 miles an hour fastballs. So, relative to other major leaguers, it might still be a concern, but I don't think he will struggle as much on 93 plus mile per hour fastballs as he did when he was in Japan, because he'll just see more of them.
The plan, by the way, is to have somebody who specifically covers these players and covers Japanese baseball come on to the podcast soon and kind of break these players down in depth and let us know what we need to know about them before the 2026 season. Let's take our final break. When we return, a couple of other things we learned out at First Pitch Arizona. We'll talk about that right after this.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ. Streaming free anywhere you are.
Welcome back in Fantasy Baseball today. Let's take a look back at what we learned this weekend out at First Pitch Arizona. And the first thing here, Chris, concern for pitchers the year after a velocity bump. So we heard this from Dave McDonald, great NFBC player, in the Avoiding Starting Pitcher Landmines panel while we were there. We also heard something similar from the legend, Ron Chandler. He said there will be an excerpt in the upcoming Baseball Forecaster this year from a doctor who said the biggest predictor of future injury for a pitcher was a velocity bump of 2+ miles per hour. Now, we don't really see velocity bumps that massive year over year. There's at least one name we could point to, and that's Cam Schlittler, so we'll get to that. But you and I both looked at this, and really the biggest jumps in fastball velocity that we saw from 24 to 25 came from Hunter Green, Max Fried, Shane Baz, Emerson Hancock. I don't think that really matters too much. Christopher Sanchez, I think, is a pretty interesting one, too. It's not a four-seam fastball, it's a sinker, but his velocity has jumped a lot from 2023 to 2025. So I guess what do you make of this assertion, and does it make you concerned about any of those pitchers?
It is important to remember that injury risk is not the only risk. And that is something that I think gets a little bit lost in these kinds of discussions. And, you'll see the screenshot of the top 10 in velocity, and someone will scratch everybody who got hurt out, and it's like 9 of the top 10 or whatever. There was a couple of years ago that was going around, but you'll see something similar this offseason, I'm sure, and fair. That's reasonable. On the other hand, a list of the 10 hardest throwing starting pitchers in baseball, it's not going to be a list of the 10 best starting pitchers in baseball. It's not going to be that different from a list of the 10 best starting pitchers in baseball. Like, it is as much as, I don't know, grumpy people on baseball broadcasts might want to say, velocity is not everything, but it's a lot. It matters. And there's a reason why every single organization in baseball, except for maybe the Rockies, is training all their pitchers to throw hard. And there's a reason we hear about dozens of players going to Driveline and Tread Athletics every offseason. And it's because if you can throw harder, it makes everything else better. Maybe your command suffers, and that, in Christopher Sanchez's case in particular, I remember him openly talking about in 2023 throwing softer to focus on command rather than velocity. And last season, maybe he was able to put both together, because we've seen that creep up since then. There are injury concern. Ryan Weathers is a good example of a guy we were really excited about when we saw that velocity jump up, and the price remained reasonable enough that even though he missed a lot of time, I think it was still a viable bet. But you do have to keep in mind, if there's a velocity jump for who's going to be a popular breakout candidate next year? Kyle Bradish. If he comes out next spring throwing 1.5 miles per hour harder, maybe you take that into account, because that's a guy that, one, is going to be pretty expensive, and two, probably doesn't need much more velocity. So I think when you're looking at velocity jumps and getting excited about them for fantasy, it should be more about fringe guys that you're hoping can break out, and guys that actually need that velocity. I don't want to see Chase Burns throwing harder next year. That does nothing for me with Chase Burns, because my only concern with Chase Burns is, can he stay healthy? I think he's going to be an absolute superstar just the way he is. So, that is, I think, the way to look at it is, one, it's not the only risk, but it is a risk factor for sure, and a significant one. And two, you want to care more about guys who need velocity when you're talking about pushing them up. And I don't think I'm going to move guys down if they're throwing harder, but it's definitely, when you're talking about Max Fried throwing 1.9 mile per hour on his fastball harder than he did the year before. He has a pretty lengthy history of minor forearm and elbow injuries. But the thing about forearm and elbow injuries is they're only minor until they're not.
Yeah.
And, the year after that big velocity jump, maybe if you're ranking Max Fried in that 4 to 14 range or whatever we've talked a lot about, maybe this is a good reason to put Max Fried behind Jacob deGrom or Hunter Brown if you weren't already doing that. I almost said Cole Reagans, but the guy who missed 120 innings last year with a shoulder injury, maybe not the best example. Or Hunter Green, I was also going to say, again, maybe not the best example because his velocity jumped up a ton last year too.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly like what you just said about Chase Burns. Is Hunter Green, we know that you can already succeed throwing 97 miles per hour. You don't have to throw 99 on average, right? We saw it 2 years ago. You were still one of the best pitchers in baseball when you're healthy, throwing 97-ish, sitting 97, 98. And then this year he was like 99, 100. So, and especially for someone like Hunter Green, he has that history of some shoulder stuff, some elbow stuff too. So it does worry me a little bit about Hunter Green and Max Fried. And again, I'll bring up the name Cam Schlittler.
That's the one.
95 miles per hour in the minors in 2024. It was 96.6 in 2025 in the minors. So you already have that 1.6 mile per hour jump from one year to the next. And then by the time he got to the majors, he was averaging 98. So we're talking about a 3 mile per hour jump by the end of the season. And in his start against the Red Sox, it was like 99 miles per hour. So he is a bigger dude. He's 6'6", 225. Like, maybe, I don't know that it's just, I don't think it's like a blanket statement to use this for every single pitcher. There are guys that are just maybe more durable. They're, kind of bigger, stockier, stronger dudes that maybe they could just hold up with this velocity. But honestly, we just haven't seen enough from Cam Schlittler to know if he can hold up with that level of velocity.
Yeah, and every player is different. And we try to generalize and we try to, look for ranges of outcomes that everyone fits in. But you know what? Some guys just don't fit into those range of outcomes. Some guys are outliers. Some guys are Shohei Ohtani. You shouldn't bet on outliers, but outliers exist. And it's possible that Cam Schlittler will end up being one of those outliers because of his size, and maybe 99 for him is equivalent to 96 for someone else. But I think that's the other thing to keep in mind is everybody's threshold is different. And Max Fried throwing 95 might be putting more stress on his arm than Hunter Green throwing 99, just because they're different and they're capable of different things. Or, when you see a guy's velocity go down, we did this with Jacob deGrom last year where it's like, well, can he be as effective? Is this on purpose? In his case, it was clearly on purpose, but it did also limit his effectiveness. He was still awesome.
Yeah.
I don't want it to, but like Jacob deGrom's fastball was not the same pitch that it was before his velocity went down. So there's no, it would be great if there were easy answers. If there were easy answers, there wouldn't be people subscribing to this podcast. This game would be a lot easier if this stuff was easy. So it's just to say that I think it would be a mistake to say I'm taking the 10 players who had the biggest velocity jump from last season, I'm taking them off my board. Because that's not how it works, and every player is different. But you do have to account for that risk, and I think about somebody like Spencer Schwellenbach, who we talked about a little earlier. He had about a mile per hour velocity jump. He was, I think, in the top like 15 or 20, top 20 among all pitchers, probably top 10 among starters. Turns out he couldn't hold up to it.
Yeah.
His arm broke as a result of it. So that's one that, if he's going back out there this spring and throwing 97 again instead of 95, 96, it might be a little off on Spencer Schwellenbach.
Yeah. And you mentioned Cole Reagans a little bit earlier too. He kind of, what spurred this breakout was going to Trad Athletics and getting that velocity up. And it was up the previous 2 years before this. He had a fantastic season in 2024, but then what do you know? He misses most of the season in 25 with a shoulder strain. And is that due to just the increased velocity in the previous years? And
probably
it might. I feel like we're in such a gray area right now, Chris.
Yeah.
It's like for some pitchers, we want more velocity. For some pitchers, we want
that's the
less
thing.
Velocity.
I think like Cole Reagans, you don't know Cole Reagans' name if he's not throwing 96, 97.
Yeah.
Like you didn't know his name until he put on the mask or whatever. That's the thing, is that like Cole Reagans' career exists because of his ability to generate the velocity that he does from his arm slot from the left side. And could he be a major league pitcher at 94? Maybe. I don't think he'd be the same guy. So look, if you want to know whether velocity matters, ask pitchers. There's a reason they're all chasing it.
Yeah. Let's move on to the NFBC panel that I watched while I was out there. It featured Toby, a.k.a. Batflip Crazy. Again, these are all great players in the NFBC. Really smart dudes. Mike Mager and Stephen Goodwin. Mike Mager has won back-to-back auction overall championships in the NFBC, and I believe they calculated what are the chances of him actually pulling that off. 1 in 32,000. So, I would say he's pretty good at what he does. Planning to have him on sometime this offseason, too, just to talk some auction strategy and stuff, just because I feel like he's one of, if not the best auction player in the world right now.
Hopefully he'll give us the tips.
Well, you know what? He gave out a bunch here on this panel, and I am going to reveal them right now. So, on all three of his auction championship teams, he spent $104 on pitching. So that's 40% of his budget on pitching, 60% on hitting. I feel like people ask about what your hitter-pitcher split is, dividing up your $260 and, all right, how much do you spend on hitting? How much do you spend on pitching? Some people spend more attention to it than others, but I thought it was interesting that all three of his teams turned out the exact same way, is actually leaning a little bit heavier on the pitching side, because more often than not, the average you see is kind of like 70-30, maybe 65-35, but 60-40 tells me that Mike Mager is pretty aggressive when it comes to at least bidding on pitching in auctions.
What I'd love to see is a breakdown of how that's divvied up. Is it?
I think he on the team that he won the championship, he had Skubal and Blake
Skubal, yeah. Which that's fun that he had Blake Snell, who threw 55 innings.
Yeah, he also his highest price hitter was Yordan Alvarez at $31, and he won the overall.
There was that quote that I said the other day from God, let me see if I can find it. Alexander Chase from Pitcher List. You win your leagues by sending your lineups. You lose your drafts by valuing players as if you are not allowed to. We always talk like, he could be a league loser. Well, no, there's no such thing. You can overcome anything if you're good enough and you find the right replacements. But that's, having Skubal and then spending $104, that tells me that he still invested quite a bit on the rest of his pitching staff. It was not necessarily just the stars or scrubs approach at pitcher.
Yeah, and you're probably wondering, how did this guy win an overall auction championship? He bid on Alvarez, he bid on Blake Snell. Well, he had Cal Raleigh, he had George Springer, and he picked up Geraldo Perdomo. So all of those things will help quite a bit when winning a championship.
Yeah, that's about $130 of pure profit on those three guys.
He also pointed out many of the top saves options this past season were $10 or less in the auction. So guys like Carlos Estevez, 42 saves. Robert Suarez, 40 saves. Remember, everybody was off Suarez. They wanted nothing to do with him. He was $10 or less and provided 40 saves this year. Aroldis Chapman, 32 saves. Trevor McGill, 30 saves. Kenley Jansen, 29 saves. I'm not sure how sticky this is year over year, Chris, but it just goes to show that you can live in the second or third tier in terms of closers in a 12-team or even 15-team roto league and still perform quite well.
I'm extremely interested to see how the closer market's going to shake out this year. Obviously, we have the early drafts, but specifically with closers, that's a very different marketplace than you're going to see later in NFBC drafts, but also especially in your home leagues, because NFBC drafts tend to push closers up. They're 15-team leagues. They're deeper formats, so the replacement level is not nearly as high. And when you're drafting at this time of year, November, I don't know, half the league, we don't know who their closer is going to be next year, right? Maybe more right now. So I know Andres Munoz is the Mariners closer. I know Edwin Diaz is someone's closer, probably the Mets. If not the Mets, probably another good team, because it's probably not going to be a bad team that signs him to a $70 million contract. So those guys all tend to get pushed up in these drafts.
You will see that too if you check out the draft that I did and the results that I put on the website. There were, I think, 3 different closers that went in the 3rd round of a 15 league. So
that's just because there is so much uncertainty, and you need closers still, even when you're drafting in November. So that's one of the things you have to pay up for. Is that.
While talking about closers, I did just want to quickly run through, because I took these notes for a panel I did while I was out there, season-long trends, and we were talking about saves. I looked into all the new managers this offseason to see, try to get a feel of what their tendency might be for bullpen usage moving forward. So Walt Weiss went to the Braves, mostly had a dedicated closer when he was with the Rockies, and he was the bench coach for the Braves under Brian Snitker, where they pretty much just use one closer. So I feel good about that one. Blake Butera is the Nationals manager. He was previously the Rays senior director of player development, first-time manager. I think it's pretty tough to say. Like, we don't really have an idea of how Blake Butera is going to use his bullpen. Derek Shelton is now the manager of the Twins, mostly used one main closer when he was with the Pirates. So not that I think the Twins have a pitcher who's viable enough to be that person, but maybe they sign a cheap veteran or something like that. Craig Albernaz, Orioles manager, he was most recently with Stephen Vogt in Cleveland, where they used one dedicated closer. Before that, Albernaz was with the Giants while Gabe Kapler was there. Gabe Kapler was annoying for a lot of things in fantasy, but he did typically just use one closer. So I'm hoping that Craig Albernaz in Baltimore just kind of picks up what he learned from other stops and uses one closer. Kurt Suzuki is the Angels manager for one season at least. And he was a special assistant to the Angels GM from 2023 before being hired as their manager this offseason. During that time, they had Carlos Estevez and Kenley Jansen. Kurt Suzuki, former player, he's also caught a lot of great closers in his career. We don't really have an idea, but I would lean towards them using one guy. They signed Robert Stevenson a couple of years ago, and it seems like he's finally healthy, so perhaps they use him as the closer. Skip Schumacher, Chris, you know this from his days with the Marlins. He was pretty much a dedicated closer kind of guy. He is now the manager of the Rangers. Of course, they need a reliever good enough to use as the closer, and I think they're going to be pretty aggressive this offseason. Craig Stammen, so he joined the Padres this weekend as their manager. He also has been with the team since 2024 as an assistant to the Major League coaching staff and baseball operations department. He's a former reliever. I don't think he was ever really a closer or picked up many saves. He might have picked up a few here and there. He has Mason Miller at his disposal. We don't really know what Mason Miller's role is going to be yet. With that being said, Chris, speaking to some people this weekend, some smart people who might be in the know on the situation, they seemed very convinced that Mason Miller will remain a reliever next season.
I understand why they would want to move him to starting pitcher. One, to just justify that price they paid for him, although that's not necessarily the way they should look at it. And then two, it's just Joe Musgrove coming back from, he had Tommy John, right?
Either Tommy John or the internal brace, but it was definitely major elbow surgery.
He's coming back from having not pitched since like the summer of 2024. That's your number 2.
Yu Darvish out for the year.
Yeah, Randy Vasquez might be the number 3. So they need starting pitching because Michael King's a free agent. Maybe they bring him back. Dylan Cease is a free agent. Doesn't seem like that's going to happen. This is a team that there are real concerns about this team's financial situation right now. There's some ownership questions. I think there's like an ongoing fight over who's going to be in control of that team long term. So
they did throw out that Adrian Morejon might be used as a starter as well. So that's an option.
I would rather they try that than try Mason Miller, just because Miller has shown no ability to stay healthy. He had thrown, it was something like 30 combined innings as a professional over 3 seasons before he got called up. Even in 2023, when he tried to be a starter, remember he sprained his elbow, I think, or had a forearm, something like that, while starting. They eventually moved him to the bullpen.
Yeah.
I think it would be a mistake to try to use him as a starter. I don't, he's built like an NFL free safety. He is massive.
Yeah.
I don't think he can hold up. I would love to be proven wrong, and maybe they're feeling themselves after the Michael King experience, and then they take that chance. But I think it would be a mistake. I don't think it's worth the risk with a pitcher this gifted.
The last new manager this offseason is Tony Vitello, who signed with the Giants. He is a first-time manager at the major league level. He's coming from the University of Tennessee, where it looks like he used multiple players to get saves. To be honest, Chris, I don't watch or follow a lot of college baseball, so this might just be normal to use a bunch of relievers to get saves and close out games. So I don't think we have any idea with somebody like Tony Vitello. But for some of those names, I have a pretty good inkling of how they're going to use their bullpen and hopefully a dedicated closer for next season. I had a few other things here from this NFBC panel I wanted to mention. At bats, a key indicator on the offensive side. So it was just, they pointed out the correlation between maximizing at bats per week and your chances of performing better in the 5 offensive categories. And it's just, a lot of those are outside of batting average, it's all volume based. So you really do need to maximize that. And it's avoiding injuries, avoiding platoons, maximizing games played on the schedule within the week, looking at teams that have 7 games or, 6 righties on the schedule for left-handed bats. Just really kind of being diligent with playing time and things like that. He said he was much more likely to bid $30 on a player in FAB than $200 or $300. So that's if you play in a $1,000 FAB league. If you play in 100, it's 3 versus 30. So just kind of taking your stabs on, I guess, some veteran or middling bats throughout the course of the season, rather than going after the flashy prospect or, the would-be closer early on in the season that's going to go for way too much money. So I thought that was interesting. And then the last point here, just an emphasis and a focus on the ratio stats, which I feel like I bring up every offseason, Chris, and then I just never take my own advice. It's just within the draft and within an auction, if you play in Roto or head-to-head categories league, just really, really paying attention to ERA, whip, and batting average as much as possible.
Well, and it makes sense because it might seem counterintuitive because 2 of the things you talked about were focus on your ratios and maximize your counting stats, right? And those things can be at odds, but they don't have to be, because I think you're looking at prioritizing ratios in drafts, which is your key capital for building your team, or your draft picks, or your auction values, or whatever. Your most important asset is a first round pick. Your second is your second most, and so on. And I don't know how much FAB you would have to, like, if I before the season I told you I will give you an extra $1,000 in FAB, and you give me your second round pick, I don't think you take that, right? There's no way.
No.
What round would you take an extra $1,000? Like, I think you got to go pretty deep in the draft.
Yeah, I don't
So
know, that's a good question.
So that's because your FAB is inherent uncertainty. If these guys were sure things, even Nick Kurtz was not a sure thing, despite what we saw. That guy was worth $300 in FAB.
Right.
Nick Kurtz might have been worth $1,000 in FAB, frankly.
Yeah.
But there's Jack Caglione certainly wasn't, and they were very similar prospects coming up, and we valued them very similarly when they came up. So that is all to say that your draft picks should be where you establish your floors for your ratios. And as you're going through the season, as you're managing, as you're playing the free agent wire, setting your lineups, that's where you start to pick and choose, hey, I might get an extra four or five plate appearances from this guy this week. I'll start him. That's I think the way to think about it is you can manage your counting stats, but your ratios need to be solid before you worry about that.
Couple other random things that we picked up this weekend just while talking to people. I was going to bring up the Mason Miller thing. Some smart people think he's going to remain a reliever. I mentioned that already. Lots of speculation that Jordan Lawlar could be moved for pitching. So the D-backs looking to improve their rotation, maybe even bullpen. I mean, I would have to think that Lawlar's value is still high enough to get at least a decent starting pitcher in return. With that being said, Chris, I saw you tweet that Jordan Lawlar has a 40% strikeout rate in the Dominican Winter League. So that doesn't sound great.
It's not good. He's still been hugely productive at AAA. Prospect folks still really like him, but he's got to hit at some point at the major league level. We haven't seen it yet. It's been very small sample size. The Dominican Winter League, when I saw it today, was 56 plate appearances. Very small sample size, but it's still... I'd feel better about him if he wasn't struggling against a very low level of competition, certainly.
Yeah. I threw this one out there to the Welsh, and it seemed to me like he didn't think it was a possibility. Maybe Jordan Lawlar's star has kind of fallen low enough where he can't headline a package like this. But do you think a package headlined around Jordan Lawlar for Joe Ryan is a possibility, or has his star kind of dimmed to the point where that's not realistic?
It's hard to say because when you go on Twitter and see people suggesting packages for Joe Ryan, nobody seems to value this dude too much. And oftentimes these are fans of other teams making these offers. So take that with a dump truck full of salt. But it's still like, I don't know if people realize how good Joe Ryan is. And I don't know what the market is for him. I think Lawlar plus for Ryan seems fine, but
yeah,
I could also see, maybe there's something that the scouts just really don't like about Lawlar. I could see that too.
Yeah. All right. Well, we are going to wrap there. I wanted to touch on that draft that I did a little bit, but again, you can go to the website, cbssports.com/fantasy/baseball. I wrote about picks that surprised me. I have the draft board there. I also wrote up some decisions that I had within the draft. So again, you can check that out on the site. Plus tomorrow's podcast, we are doing a recap of our first mock draft. So we'll talk more about drafts then. For Chris, I am Frank. Thanks as always for tuning in to Fantasy Baseball today. Please make sure to follow and leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify. And we will be back again tomorrow. Bye-bye.